Good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming to my talk. Shiri, I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, School of Agricultural Studies. Some people may wonder, I have brought this cold weather here to Milwaukee, but believe me, this is not really cold. I was talking to Dietmar yesterday. I said last year in Edmonton, we had a couple of days of minus 48 Celsius, which was ranked the second coldest place on Earth after Siberia. So this weather is not surprise or shocking. Anyway, I would like to talk to you about the work that I've been doing in the past 6 or 7 years, focusing on visualization and knowledge organization systems. So there's a reason I have used the word confluence, because it's a very interesting time for information organization, information retrieval, human-computer interaction, because there are some projects going on that are merging these areas and disciplines. Before that, I would like to, as I said, I would like to show a few of the projects that have been going on visualization, like search engines, search systems, web-based databases, etc., and then move on to visualization of thesauri as one type of knowledge organization systems, and then introduce 2 projects that I have been working on to develop prototype visualized user interfaces for academic users. So speaking of visualization, I thought I should just quickly show you this word cloud of this presentation. Obviously, talking about interfaces, thesauri, browsing, interaction, digital information, and visualization. So this talk, and also my research to some extent, draws upon these subject areas. I thought I should show you these facets of research that I'm working on. Information organization, obviously, I teach information organization and digital libraries at the University of Alberta. So here, in this talk, the focus would be on knowledge organization systems, a term that has been used by IOrg and for example, in particular in typology of knowledge organization systems, and by Van der Graaf in the UK, and they have proposed different types of knowledge organization systems. So I'll talk about this later on. The whole area of information retrieval, particularly exploratory search. I will be talking about exploratory search and show you examples of exploratory search interfaces. And what that means is basically looking at user interfaces that are not query driven, or they are mainly for exploration or browsing, and visualization plays a key part in that process. I use the term human information interaction because when we talk about knowledge organization, user interface design, and the context with the digital libraries, you will see that research brings these areas together to offer more enhanced, if you like, environment for users' interaction with the information. And obviously, when it comes to the HCI, or human computer interaction, information visualization and user interface design are areas or sub areas of this talk. So let's start with these. So I'll go over each facet and show you some examples. Knowledge organization systems, as I mentioned, there's a typology. Yale Hodge used it for, in particular, relation to digital libraries in 2000. Other people have added some elements. So you'll see here even bibliometric maps now are categorized as knowledge organization systems. My areas of interest, particularly in relation to thesauri and how we can actually visualize them: taxonomies, topic maps, taxonomies, subject heading lists, synonym rings, and ontologies. So it's a very rich and vast area. So I will be focusing mainly on thesauri here. Exploratory search, I mentioned the term exploratory search over the past few years, starting I think 2005 and 2006. a number of information search and retrieval researchers focused on this notion of exploratory user interfaces, where these user interfaces are not necessarily query-based or query-driven. Rather, the interface provides some browsing and exploration or exploring environment for users, particularly users who do not have a well-defined information need to explore the concept or the concept map or the collection of information. Usually, some of these explorative search interfaces have used, for example, facets. Now we see faceted browsing has become one type of exploratory search systems, high-level categories. I'll show you examples of user interfaces later on. And interactive or dynamic term suggestion. So for example, when you put in a term, it can be auto-completion of your search term or suggesting new terms so that you can actually expand or refine or reformulate your queries. So starting with these categories, interactive and dynamic term suggestion, and high-level categories, Jules and Schneiderman in 2007 did a very interesting and inspirational study. They decided to include some categorized views of the search results in Google involving actual users, so about 30 to 35 users. The results was published in Information Processing and Management, the journal. And so they found that users actually like these categorized views, and they can actually use to reformulate or modify or change their search patterns or search terms. So this is specifically, it can be, it can be, for example, geography or time, depending on the facets that you choose. This can be implemented. Later on, Google actually used that. So this feature, these features were introduced by the Google search interface. Nowadays, if you don't notice it because it's there, and you actually use it, for example, last 24 hours, if you want to narrow down your search, whatever you search, I just with Canadian Association for Information Science. So I want to see what are the publications or results of the past 24 hours talking about this association, for example. So in a way, you're just helping the user to explore and gain a better understanding of what the, what aspects or facets of the content, can be captured in search engines. When we talk about dynamic and interactive term suggestions and term suggestion features, you will see nowadays many corporate websites, search engines nowadays are trying to incorporate these features. For example, if you start searching, for example, for exploratory search, Google offers these, for example, sometimes queries, sometimes terms, depending on how the system is set up or how the algorithm is working. Then you can just, rather than this first search term, you can choose this one or the second one. Mark Giannini, for example, is there because he was one of the people who have focused on mainly on exploratory search and the introduction of the notion of exploratory search. Other search engines, for example, Yahoo has done this, but it's a different setting. So you get a search term, information retrieval techniques, and then it says explore related concepts. So it shows topics and search terms that are somehow related to what you're putting in. It's more like static, but it shows, or you can actually explore further or click on any of these and carry out a search based on that term. Bing as well. I'm just showing these just to form a context for you that these are some of the developments that are taking place, that they are using the power of semantics in a way, or what they call related terms, etc. So, and you'll see that there are some suggested terms here. So we talk about dynamic and interactive term suggestion, categorized views, and also faceted browsing. You all know that this area is becoming increasingly popular, particularly by by information architecture community. They are using these facets to actually organize information on their website. So a large number of organizations, corporate bodies, and associations are trying to use these techniques, particularly faceted browsing, for exploring the content. Again, it's the whole notion of exploration of information, and you'll see facets. For example, people, persons, materials, styles. This is a flamenco project at the University of California, Berkeley. This was developed by Marty Hurst and her colleagues there. So it's a very interesting and influential work. A lot of, as I said, website designs and website design ideas actually are influenced by this project in particular. So I just chose this one. And you will see that at the bottom here, you have a subject exploration feature where you can actually narrow down or change or switch to a different term or see if you will see these collections. What I like about this interface is it gives you this the power of faceted browsing and looking at the result and double check, cross check, or change your search behavior based on viewing results and modifying your search. So the third facet was digital libraries. It's a very fascinating area. I'm very interested in this area. I worked when I was a PhD student. I was working at the Center for Digital Library Research at the University of Strathclyde for a couple of years. And there, we were working on exactly projects that incorporated user interfaces and knowledge organization systems. But there, we were developing meta-thesauri, if you like, so combining multiple knowledge organization systems such as thesauri, classification schemes, etc. Or again, for the purpose of cross-browsing across different collections. So it's a very interesting area, and some of the developments that are related to this talk, in particular visual user interfaces, which I will show you examples of again, and the whole notion of knowledge organization systems, metadata, and subject access. So for example, I'm very interested in how we can visualize metadata elements. So not just knowledge organization systems such as thesauri or classification schemes, but if any collection or each collection, if they have a specific set of metadata elements that we can use to show collections in a more sort of interactive way, that would be very useful and interesting. And in the context of, again, digital libraries, there's a lot of studies on search behavior, user search behavior, from transaction log analysis studies, which have become very popular over the past 10 years, to look into the, to users' behavior, how they interact with digital libraries, how they use digital libraries, whether it's the interface or deeper layers, content, for example, queries, query formulations, etc. And can we model those behaviors? And obviously information architecture. So these are interrelated, really, areas, and depending on what you choose for your research, you can combine these and make interesting contribution. So, because the title of my talk focuses on digital libraries and user interfaces, so what I'm claiming is because of the power of visualization techniques that are available these days, we can actually use those techniques and enhance users' interaction through knowledge organization systems. In other words, using the power of and the intellectual asset in knowledge organization systems and create more interactive and visualized search and interaction environments. So, in other words, these techniques can be useful, can actually enhance the way you represent information. So representation of information can be in terms of metadata, but also in terms of how you put this on the interface. What categories do you use to allow users to explore your collection? That is also representation. So representation can take place at different levels. And the fact that visualization provides us with opportunities to create a searching, browsing, navigation, and exploration environment, more, as I said, more interactive than ever before. So I would like to just review some examples of visual user interfaces again. So we reviewed those facets. one of the very interesting projects is this. This is an emergent mosaic of Wikipedia activity done by Kathy Warner at Indiana with her colleagues. This is a National Science Foundation project. So the idea is, how can we visualize large and huge digital environments and spaces and collections? And you can obviously zoom in and see more specifically. You interact with this interface. So for example, these are top 20 most hotly revised articles in Wikipedia. So Vietnam War, for example, Pope Benedict, and then you can make it even more specific. So the interaction with information is different. It's visual, but it's visual, it's rich, and it engages the user in a different way. So this was an interesting project I thought I should mention. A historical flashback to, for example, search engines, to see how rich they have become in terms of information representation. So this is Yahoo search interface in 1996. You get some categories here. This is Yahoo 2002. Obviously, you see a lot of metadata and a richer user interface with lots of information, and this is 2010, which obviously is a combination. You will see these icons. So obviously, visual elements are becoming more important, and users like them. So that's why user interface designers incorporate those in their user interfaces. So other developments, there are lots of visual search engines around. Grokr has become very popular, and even EBSCO, the vendor, the database provider, has they have bought this and incorporated into their bibliographic database searching. You get, for example, Google Touch Graph, which is a very interesting project. Mooter, Car2, which was a meta search engine, visualized. It's not available. I think it was available until last year, so they stopped at it. Probably they want to commercialize that. But I'm going to show you some of these examples. This is Touch Graph. The system is actually prototype available on the web, so you can actually search for different terms just to see how clusters of results appear on the user interface, along with some, brief metadata. For example, if it is the URL, or sometimes if you hover around these, you can actually see the title or metadata. And the left-hand side, they have a textual representation of the information sources that we have basically retrieved. And this is from Car2, meta search engine. Again, they are using metaphors of pages and URLs, along with some categorized views on the left-hand side, so you can navigate and you can choose these terms. Mooter is another example. It's not rich in information, but it's a sort of star type representation of the terms that you use and things that are related. Obviously, some of these are really prototype systems, so they may not work properly when we talk about sort of hardcore information retrieval, in the sense that algorithms that you design to enhance users' search and interaction. Cool Torch, another example, using circles, small circles, to show the number of documents and different clusters of terms, or small sub-collections that are related to, for example, the term digital libraries. So now that gets us to this idea of visualization of thesauri, which I'm specifically interested in. I should warn you that I have a lot of visuals here, but I think it's important for introducing those projects. Again, this is a visualization of the MESH thesaurus, the medical subject headings thesaurus, that was done by Korn and Schneiderman again in 1995. The idea was we create a user interface like this. Users can actually browse and drill down from high level or top classes to more specific which was a prototype system. This one I really like by Johnson and Cochran in 1995. They use the Inspect thesaurus, which is attached to the Inspect database in the area of electrical engineering, electronic, and computer information sciences. Searches can be highlighted like this, and you can see narrower terms or specific terms attached to that term. But what I like is the way they have shown related terms, because that's always a challenge. How you show related terms, if they're not hierarchical, broader, or narrower, how do you use those? So it's like a sort of tag cloud here that was done in 1995. The project by Hurst and Karate, it's particularly interesting. They use the mesh thesaurus to visualize, but it's a three-dimensional visualization, which is particularly interesting. But what they've done is, in addition to providing users with the possibility and opportunity to interact with the thesaurus, they show the results here. So there is this multi-layered interaction model that you can switch between the result and the thesaurus, and click on any of these nodes with retrieve documents, and we can see, and you can obviously change or switch the order of the results based on metadata elements. In Socklib in 2000, they used this metaphor of circles for results and a sort of tree-like visualization of facets, high-level facets from a thesaurus. And more specifically, so if you click on terms, it would be highlighted, and then it would the result would appear on the right-hand side pane, and you will see what documents are specifically associated with that term, or terms that we have chosen. Visual thesaurus, you probably have seen it on the web. It's a very interesting project. It's not an information retrieval thesaurus. It's a language thesaurus. But the idea is interesting that when you use a search term to search the system, for example, information, it shows this structure, and you can explore each or any of these concepts in more detail. Another project out of related to the mesh thesaurus, it's a different type of visualization. And obviously, some of these projects, when you talk about prototypes and being, able to scale up to large, conceptual spaces, that is a challenge. How can you for example, show 100 terms here in this limited space or environment? But the idea is, again, you can drill down a facet to get to specific terms or narrow terms. Again, more sort of hierarchical. This one is using a self-organizing map. They are using the mesh thesaurus again. Interestingly enough, many of these projects are using the mesh thesaurus because it's well structured. So the textual view and the map view, you can zoom in and get documents, a number of documents for each cluster of results. So so I'll be talking now about the project that I have been involved in, and we have developed two prototype user interfaces. The first one, the idea was, the idea of these two projects was to basically tap into the power of thesauri for creating a user interface that can enhance searching. In other words, integrate this thesaurus into the search process, as opposed to having thesaurus as a separate entity for interaction and the database as a separate entity. So, and we were obviously interested in exploratory search interfaces, as we said. So, can users navigate and explore the conceptual space of this thesaurus or not, or if it can, in what ways? And in particular, we were interested in bilingual and multilingual thesauri. So that's probably one of the differences with previous projects. So in terms of theoretical framework, we used two ideas. The first one, rich prospect, is come from an HCI perspective. Basically, the idea is we can have multiple representations of a thesaurus on the user interface in terms of visualization. This was done by Rucker, who is my colleague at the University of Alberta Humanities Computing Program. So I've been collaborating with them, for this project over the past 4 years, 5 years. And the second set of sort of principles comes from my own PhD work in the area of source-based searching. So in that we should be providing searching, browsing, navigation, a combination of searching and browsing, which somehow is one of the characteristics of exploratory searches or search systems. The first project that we developed a thesaurus enhanced visual interface was we used the Government of Canada core subject thesaurus, which is a general purpose thesaurus. It's bilingual, and it's been associated with a number of digital collections, in particular the Government of Canada site and government documents. So the thesaurus is available online, obviously, but we had to contact the government to actually get a copy of that. It represents standard relationship types like broader terms, narrow term, related terms, synonymous terms, etc. And it is a faceted thesaurus in a sense that there are 14, 15 high-level facets and categories that users can drill down. Note that many thesaurus are not necessarily faceted. There are a list of terms with relationship types. So we use that. So this is the interface that they had initially. So you have this interword or it's a search box, and you had browse subject categories, these high-level facets that I was talking about. And when you click on when you click on browse subject categories, you will see a list of terms under that, and obviously you can see the details of each term. But these are separate steps and separate basically procedures for looking at data like this. So you can see terms here. So what our design idea was to create a user interface that combines these three spaces: query space where users can formulate queries, thesaurus space where people can actually browse a thesaurus, and document space. Where, by document space here I mean result view space. So the interface should allow for these two processes, as well as allowing the user to actually view results there and then, rather than going to a different user interface or choosing a separate path. The first user interface that we designed is based on the Government of Canada core subject thesaurus. Looks like this. Well, I'm going to show you a quick demo later on. In terms of spaces, this is the query space, so you can actually query the database, or you can select terms, and this is the search term pool that you can actually select as many terms as you want, and then use. I'll show you in the next slide more detailed view of these elements. With the source space, where you have the high-level categories right to the left, and then clicking on any of those facets, you will see terms. And I'll show you, as I said, I show you relationship types in the next slide. And the search results or document results space. So we work based on these spaces. So a more specific description would be, those are the high-level facets. These are actual thesaurus terms, for example, if you click on economics and industry or music, etc. You will have these relationship types, which you're not able to see here properly, but when I show the demo, you'll see that there's a tooltip that actually, when you hover around those, you'll see the relationship type. And the query formulation area. The selected terms that we can actually select, combine using and or. There's no not here. Other Boolean operators, and the results. So I can show you the actual prototype on the web. It looks like similar to that. And I didn't talk about the language, but language is one of the I think, interesting features of the user interface. So if you click on, for example, information on communication, you'll see a list of terms associated with that. And particularly if you click on, for example, a term like academic libraries, you will see the French sort of equivalent for the term academic libraries. Clicking that term, it automatically appears here. So you can choose what languages you want to actually search, French and Spanish. And note that Spanish is there because in the second project we use the UNESCO thesaurus, which is multilingual, and we have populated these two for the sort of testing. So you can actually see whether this term appears in the Government of Canada course subject thesaurus as well as the multilingual, the UNESCO multilingual thesaurus. And so when you choose this, you can then retrieve documents. Yeah. So, and you'll see the results. I know that this is not the best type of design to particularly show results because you have to scroll down. So we had a discussion about this, but just to show you that in one user interface, the users are able to browse. And you can use this tool too. So for example, academic libraries, you will see how many related terms are there, or if there are any narrow terms. So note that we use narrow terms, more like terms that more indexers and librarians and information professionals are familiar with, than more specific and generals, which we fixed in the next project. So you'll see broader term, for example, libraries is a broader term for academic libraries, right? So, and you can explore these. So, for example, this is non-preferred term, university libraries. University libraries is a non-preferred term for academic libraries, meaning that it would be ideal if you used academic libraries as a search term. But that doesn't mean that you can't use this, so you can choose these. The interesting feature about this thesaurus is also the, bilingual searching. So you can actually switch between English and French quickly and just retrieve results in both languages or either. So you can see here, for example, again, the same relationship types. You can see, or you can go back to the terms. So these terms are, as I said, clickable, and you'll see this number of documents for each, depending on how many documents are actually described using that term. You can see there and then. So this is the notion of multiple representation, multiple representations of the content, that we try to include as many cues as possible for the user to say, okay, I'm looking for academic libraries, and there are 348 documents attached to this. So what if I just narrow it down? And also you can carry out searches. For example, the term immigration, which appears there. And again, you have the ability to change this switch to French, and you can clear all these and note that the terms that appear, you see, immigration. This is what I'm talking about, exploration. You know, you have immigration here, you have immigration, you have immigrants, population increase, illegal immigration. These are not necessarily all of them. You see that some of them are related terms. One is a preferred term. So we have tried to show synonyms or synonymous terms and related terms in a way that is more, in other words, easier to understand. Because if you show them everything hierarchically, it can be quite difficult to let the user know what are the associations or relations here. And also you can just quickly switch to alphabetical list of terms. Right? For example, if you just click on T, and as I said, any of these terms, or operator or an operator. So back to this. So this was the first project that the first site that we developed. We did a user study of the user interface involving about 16 users from Humanities Computing, Department of Mother Languages, English and Mother Languages, and Library Functions students, MLIS. And some of the comments made about the interface, that they particularly like the idea of combining searching and browsing, or having this power of choosing between searching and browsing. And this is in line with some previous research about particularly Bates' idea of user interface design in 1990, that you have to allow users to have control over the search process. Not everything can be done automatically, like expanding a query, for example. So allow them to explore the conceptual space of a system to be able to make decisions. They found the bilingual, switching between English and French, and being able to retrieve results in either or both languages, they found quite interesting. The search term pool was, as I showed here, I think, the search term pool of selected terms that appears automatically, they found it particularly useful. There were some challenges in terms of, okay, these are the high-level facets, these terms are from the thesaurus, so what are the associations? So we thought, okay, just look at these as a set of terms that are, is suggested by the system. So explore to see if there are any terms that you're interested or you narrow down. An important finding, particularly from an information seeking and information retrieval perspective, is that they found browsing useful, people who did not have much prior knowledge of the topic they were searching for, or they were totally unfamiliar, or the subject area was quite new to them. So they found this quite interesting because they could explore and say, okay, I'm looking for this, or probably it's a more specific aspect of the search. The second one, the UNESCO thesaurus, multilingual, English, French, Spanish, and it does have the Russian, which we did not include, but is a separate, that's maintained by the UNESCO currently, covers these subject areas: education, culture, natural sciences, social, human sciences, communication, and information. As an international perspective, a lot of organizations are using libraries, archives, museums are using the UNESCO thesaurus, and has been used for developing different thesauri, like the humanities and social science electronic thesaurus used in the UK Data Archive, for example. And so, as I said, because it's multilingual and it's available on the web, we thought it would be a very useful tool to experiment with. So the rationale for choosing this and our approach comes from these two studies. Nancy Williamson noted that using the UNESCO thesaurus is a very valuable, useful tool, but there are problems in terms of alphabetical browsing and hierarchical browsing. And it would be good if there would be research into how we can actually enhance or make user interfaces to the UNESCO thesaurus more user-friendly. The second idea of Opelson's idea of nonlinear web-like browsing. This was in the paper titled "How We Construct Subjects: Feminist Analysis." So the idea is, many people from different cultures or different backgrounds or different gender, they may look for information not necessarily hierarchical. So it would be useful to use the power of browsing, and particularly she talks about related terms, and the fact that the notion of related terms and how the types of related terms are not, in thesauri are very limited, right? We have a number of them, 3 or 4, but it obviously can be expanded. So we thought that, so why don't we use these ideas to develop some interface that can actually use related terms and synonymous terms, but not like standard thesaurus with RTs, short for related terms. So this is the UNESCO thesaurus interface that they have. So you have a term like population, and you have obviously the different languages, the equivalent of the term, and then you have synonyms, and you have RTs, you know, related terms, used for terms, synonymous terms, etc. So, and it's totally separate from the search process. What we did, which comes in the next slide, is we thought we should use visual objects, size, color, and location of those terms to distinguish between different types of relationships. So, and we obviously used previous research, like work by Johnson and Cochrane in showing related terms, and the representation of information as a set of visual elements that users can interact with. This is the interface that we've developed. So I'll show you the elements. On the left-hand side, again, we thought, this is based on the previous project, but we thought that we should include a list of terms. It can be browsed hierarchically or alphabetically. We have a search bar that has an auto-completion feature. So based on the source, so as soon as you put in you know, a number of characters, you will see the list of terms that are available. This way, we changed the how to show relationship types, so which I will show you in my demonstration. So you can actually choose a term or related terms to the term that you have searched for example. If there are any more specific terms associated with your term, if there are any synonyms or and then scope note. We thought that this would be useful not only for searchers but also for people who are doing indexing. And the languages that in our actual prototype, languages appear there, not here. So this is the only difference that you will see. So in terms of relationship types, so if you search for hydrography, for example, we thought we should it would be good if we included narrower terms, and this is what most systems have done in terms of exploding, meaning that include the term along with all its narrower terms. So appear there. Broader terms, because they are very broad and can be broader terms for multiple terms, they are shown in gray along with the number of documents at the top. And then related terms we'll see around the actual term and synonyms. So the reason that we thought that we have to include this in a way is maybe a little bit away from the fact that we keep showing RTs, NTs, and BTs, or broader terms to the user, but let them explore these terms based on the availability of these terms, and obviously the operators. So let me just quickly show you a... so this is the interface that we have. Unfortunately, I can't see all of this in this screen, but I'll try my best. So if I just put in a term like Sori, talking about Sori, so the idea of so yeah, so this is the so if we look for information technology, for example, so you have these controls here to show, for example, related terms for exploring. So and these are all clickable, so you can see an error specific term for that. If there's a more specific term, it would appear there in the middle. There's no general, so there's no broader term here and here, but you can see scope note if you want to. So it's the idea of interacting with all these elements based on your own, discretion basically. So if you choose these terms, or this term, information technology appears there, and you can choose languages, English, French, and Spanish. So if we, for example, do that, you can retrieve documents. Let me see if I can, yeah, and note that it's because it's prototype, we are still working on showing the results and how clickable they can be. So currently it's titles can appear on the right hand side, but we would like to create filters for author, even subject metadata around this. And these dots, the closer they are to the center, that means that the descriptor or the term from the thesaurus appears either, well, apart from the actual being a descriptor, appears in title or the abstract of the documents described by UNESCO organization using the UNESCO thesaurus. You can also browse the thesaurus hierarchically as well on the right hand side, as I said, like if you click on any of these. Again, for example, indexing languages. And again, you can, as I said, you can interact with these elements of, so to make it easy to understand, we use, as I said, more specific or broader terms. And language also is another feature. So if you have, let me just go to choose language. And so, for example, if you search for drop now in French, now I can show you the related terms which appear here, and there is no, but there are two basically broader terms. So it's using this space in a way to explore broader terms, narrow terms, related terms. And the Spanish version also available here, which you can click on, for example, let's see, water supply. Again, from the UNESCO source. So you can click on the related to this. Obviously, has more related terms in this term, water supply, and you can again use more general, and you can select a term here, and you can basically remove the previously searched term. So the idea of exploring this conceptual space for, using this thesaurus to carry out searching. So interaction takes place at multiple levels and layers, whether you choose to be hierarchical or alphabetical, and look at the terms would help users. And then obviously a number of documents indexed. So we have used some of the principles that we have used in previous, and you can see that if you click specific term, and this bar shows how you progress throughout your search process. So I have one more slide to show you, and that would be, if you don't mind, Tom. So these are the two interfaces that we've developed. We've just finished the user-centered evaluation of this user interface end of November. So we are very excited to go and analyze data. In this study, because it was a funded project, we involved 25 faculty members, students from a wide range of disciplines, just to see not just LIS and humanities computing who are more search savvy. And so as for what we are going to do next is, we would like to experiment with the idea of word cloud and tag cloud. So to see if we can show those thesaurus terms, because of the value of those semantic relationships in thesauri, between these two, whether we can use tag clouds and word clouds to show those. For example, can we use, can we have broader terms here, narrow terms, close, related terms around, just to create a more conceptually rich environment for interaction and for searching. And finally, I would like to acknowledge these people who worked with me on these two projects and the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, where the actual funding is coming to make this possible. And
question, not so much related to the visualization, but maybe some of the challenges related to the multiple language people. It seems to me that the way these thesauri work is that there's a one-to-one mapping between ideas or terms across languages, and as we know that's not always the case. And I'm just wondering how, and I noticed that there were different numbers of documents tied to each term depending on the language. So the term then is, it doesn't apply across languages. So if you search in English, it's not going to retrieve French documents. Is that correct?
Yes, that's how it works. And yeah, it was and it is a challenge because the whole area of cross-language information, or cross-language, which we said to the thesauri as a way of translating queries, sometimes partial translation. But in our case, we didn't delve into the actual retrieval side of it, whether we can. So most of them are exact matches, the terms that match exactly the documents that had those terms in, for example, in Spanish or in French. But getting to a point that we can combine all of them was challenging. It's challenging.
Yeah, I think that's another level of complexity.
Exactly. Yeah, and which requires more looking into. As I said, cross-lingual information retrieval, how when you say this term is directly an exact translation of this term across documents and across the collection, then there are always issues about partially relevant, very relevant, and marginally relevant documents that you have to make a decision how to retrieve them. Right? Yeah, it is a challenge, but we actually use their API, the Government of Canada and the UNESCO, to index their collections. But not a lot of sort of work on ranking in particular. Only the terms that appear in titles and metadata records, which we thought would be useful for this project.
I think your report is very interesting. So you focused on the browsing of the source terms, the broad terms, narrow terms. So that's the context of the browsing part. My question would be, have you thought about how to integrate the browsing terms with the documents? Because after all, the users will be more interested in the actual documents than the terms. The terms just helping them to find the relevant or useful documents. So how do you, is there a way you can integrate the context of the source and then into the document too? So the documents will not be just a separate part, it will be an integrate part of those terms.
And how would, this is a very interesting question. So when you say showing the source for browsing, how would you show that in tandem with the collection? Is that like having a thesaurus in alphabet?
Yeah, because basically the thesaurus terms help them to come up with a query. But the purpose basically for any user is try to find the relevant and useful documents. So I was wondering, for the time being, it seems like the results part is separate of the thesaurus. So is there a way when users start to browsing or evaluating the documents, then those terms can be kind of related to them, help them to come up with a quick evaluation decision?
So looking at full text of articles or documents,
right
there and then,
right. So you bring a context of the thesaurus into a document. So how does thesaurus actually play a role in this document?
That's a great question, but it's a great design challenge too, right?
That's
I mean,
true.
remember Catacomb by Marty Hurst?
Right.
That was a very interesting, I was trying to maintain and have the context on the user interface, meaning the source browsing environment, at the same time showing the results so that user can actually browse. So that's the design challenge. We have, in these projects, we have particularly focused on visualization of the source for querying and formulating it, a focus. But certainly this can be an extension in other words. Now how we can show those results that we have found, but in a way that is seamless, not again going to a different procedure for viewing the results and or particularly focus on things. Yes.
Very interesting interface. Very impressive. So my question is regarding the visualization of the source for the user. It's depending on what's the target user, are they the novice user or are they the experienced user? So I think like for the experienced user, if they get, for example, maybe the initial learning curve is pretty sharp.
Right.
Yeah, but you understand what kind of graphic means related term, what kind of graph related to graph terms. But if you're a novice user, just come here, it get more confusing rather than helpful. So, my kind of like suggestion is like how can you provide a more intuitive way to let the user know that the broad term, narrow term, related term, this kind of stuff.
Right. It's very interesting. You're saying this because that has been one of the challenges that we're trying to deal with, to see how to show it. For example, the first one we thought broader term, narrow terms. What does that mean to a naive user, or to a person who's not search savvy or web savvy? Which is obviously, as you said, a steeper learning curve. And that's why in the second one we thought we show these and make them more highly interactive, so that they don't bother whether this is a narrow term or synonymous term or as a related term. If they find these terms useful, these are good descriptors. If they can find a combination of these useful, then they can expand their search. But we had this difficulty in the first one, the user evaluation that we had on the first user interface. At least I think 3 or 4 expressed that it can be confusing, because should we browse this high level facets, or these these specific terms associated with high level facets? What is the relation here, right? But once they learn, this was interesting because we gave them assigned search tasks and browsing tasks, and the search task that they brought, because we wanted to create an environment where they can search for assigned topics as well as their own genuine search topics. And that's why they found that this structure would, the browsing in particular, would be useful for people with prior knowledge of the topic. And this was one of the findings actually when I got 7, 8 years ago when I was doing my PhD, that advanced users and not beginners, they use the thesaurus and they can take advantage of the thesaurus, but in different ways. Like, for example, faculty members that I studied during my PhD, they were very interested in narrow terms. But, beginners were interested in related terms. So these are interesting, like, patterns of how they understand or how they can make sense of these relationship terms. But it certainly is, it's a very interesting prior topic, knowledge, how does that impact, or the search experience, how does that impact their interaction with this type of interface. Okay.
Thank you for coming in, and thank you for giving us something to chew on.